Catch me! I'm falling from heaven. You didn't catch me. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you guys this is post-commentary this time around. And it is post-commentary because yesterday I decided to go ahead and start playing because I just wanted to play the game. I wanted to play Dark Souls. But I knew that I couldn't really do anything without commentary explaining each area that I was going through. So I ended up playing anyways, and then realizing about halfway through, I am not in the mood to do this. I am not concentrating, I'm dying left and right because I am all out of sorts. And I found that I was eventually just not saying anything, so I decided, you know what, future Eli, it's your job now. And I really appreciate it. And notice how much shit these guys eat whenever I hit them with 1 R2 now. Since I'm flying into the walls. Now, these are giant skeletons. Why exactly they're giant skeletons, I don't know. They could be giant humans. They could be things that Nito experimented on. They could be the skeletons of giants. Here we see they're a tombstone. The giants do have giant tombstones. Now, it could be that they are actual giants. Like Hulk Go that we will meet later on, and the blacksmith and Orlando. Obviously way bigger than these guys are, though. Why this guy is here, I have no idea. Probably just to hold an item. That's pretty much it. There's probably some vast story behind this that I'm just too lazy to invent. And that's probably the end of it. Let's take a further trip down memory lane. Take a visit down here. You can't get all these guys in one swoop. But, which I was doing in every single... I was farming beforehand. And I got these guys every single time, except for the one time that I was recording. Now come on over here, Sweet Pea. Let me finish. Actually, I've already called one guy Sweet Pea. What's your name? Sunflower. So long, Sunflower. Boom! And he exploded everywhere. And that was the end of Sunflower. Anyways, that's the end of Sunflower. Just wanted to point out, this is not going to be a solid episode. Maybe the post-commentary will be better. Maybe the post-commentary will be better. Well, let's go to my notepad, which I read off yesterday. But I guess I'll have to read off again, thanks to Past Eli. Thanks a lot, Past Eli. Okay, first to note. Firekeeper souls. Yes, they give you 5 humanity. It's kind of funny that it's only 5 whenever you consume them. But Firekeeper souls are one of those things, sort of like ball souls. I never use them as consumable items. So I just forgot about it. I knew I'd thought about it later, but yeah. Second thing, you can roll across that little beam up there. Okay. I kind of chalked it up to the 60 frames per second thing that I've been having problems with. But yeah, you can just roll up there, as long as you have it at 30 frames per second. And other than that, let's see... Dom Hall over there at the aqueduct, which I'll probably look over here in a bit. He won't appear until we have rung both bells of awakening. It's not after you have beaten a boss or anything like that. You have to ring both bells, and that's about it for that. The last thing, the biggest screw-up of all, is that the doll that I was talking about in the last episode, the Peculiar Doll, and all of Ariamus for that matter, that is not DLC. As I said before, I started playing this well past its initial launch. At the time, right around the time that... Actually, I didn't really start playing it proper until well after even the PC release. So for some reason I had it in my head that the Ariamus content came in like the very first patch, like 1.001 or something. But that's not the case at all. It actually was launch stuff. What was confusing me is the fact that, and this is true, this is absolutely true, that all of those items, the Ariamus items, are all repurposed information. It's all repurposed data. And if you can't tell, we're going to the Catacombs today. It's all repurposed. It's all stuff that was originally part of their test bed. The Painted World, that's actually their test bed map that they used for all their testing. Nito was originally going to be the final boss of that area. So it's fitting that we're talking about it in this episode. But he was originally going to be the final boss of that area, and all of the things there, all the map information, a lot of the... Like Priscilla herself, are old sort of relics of their test bed. Go on, get out. Skip. Go on, get on that hole on his own. Go on, get on out. Now you can get rid of those guys beforehand. They will reassemble since we haven't killed their necromancer yet. That's bound to them. So they will just keep reassembling over and over again, which we'll see plenty of, believe me. And what exactly these heads are, I can't say. We will meet more of these guys much later, whenever we get down to New Londo. Whenever we get to New Londo, we'll find those big piles of black muck, which may or may not be the reassemblage of... That might actually be the flesh that has been pulled off of human bones and recollected and reconstituted into a new life form, since their spirits are still intact or something. That might be an explanation. Some people have tried to make a similar explanation for the ones that are found down in the depths, so, take that for what it is. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not, or maybe it's something that I'm just making up that's flying right out of my butthole, waving my hands in the air. Yay, actually I am waving my hands in the air. I don't know what the hell's wrong with me sometimes. Anyways, but yes, we are at the Catacombs. We are at the Catacombs. Now, oddly, the Catacombs is an optional area. It's one of the first areas that you can go to, but it seems to be intended for much, much later in the game. Alright, come over here, sweetie. Like I said, the best way is to get them to fall down this hole. You notice I did not get any souls from him, and it's not because of why you thought. It's because he's trapped down here. If you can actually see his beady little eyes staring back up at us. This little area does have a bottom modeled for us, but they're trying to create the illusion that it's a bottomless pit, when in fact it's not. It just holds a bunch of deadly, deadly skeletons. Anyways, originally I was hinting at the fact that skeletons originally did not drop souls in this game. They had to add that in. And I'm pretty sure about this one. I've got my launch release information wrong before, obviously. But originally they did not drop souls. The big ones did, however. We'll drop down here. You notice there is a gigantic pile of corpses, just all over the place. Corpses everywhere. That's because, obviously, people have been taking their dead and throwing them over that wall. Don't ask me how they got past that first wave of skeletons. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they got this far and died and fell in the heap. Who knows? But they've been taking their dead and throwing them into this gigantic pile. And obviously, people have not been taking care of this job. Because apparently this has been in a... We're going to go in here and take care of this necromancer. Because I'm not going to fight a bunch of reappearing skeletons. Hello, necromancer. So long, necromancer. And if we're lucky, one of those guys won't come down here. But skeletons originally did not drop souls. The big ones did drop souls, I think 500 exactly. And I think also slimes did not drop souls originally. So that could have had some lore significance, or it could have been an oversight. It's not really clear. Let's go ahead and clear these skeletons out down here. It could have been an oversight. But I like to think that they were actually trying to point something out about the nature of the skeletons. That they are not actually, humans. They're not people that are walking around without any flesh on their bones. They're actually just the bones of the dead. And they have been reassembled, and that's why they didn't carry around any souls. And maybe the gigantic ones, the big ones, actually carried around 500 souls or so. Maybe because of some ritual that made them big. So maybe that was something. But a few things to point out about this room. You see our skeletons with their tiny, adorable pants, clambering onto the statues of the... Well, I think I'll bring out my binoculars here in a second. The statues with the Mask of the Father on them. There are 3 masks associated with this area. The Mask of the Father, the Mask of the Mother, and the Mask of the Child. And in this case, in the early statues, it is the Mask of the Father. You can see his face on there. I'm sure that any of you have been around long enough, you recognize that face. The father of all giants, etc. Now, we are going to be seeing a bit more. I really like that skeleton. We are going to be seeing a bit more of these statues. Quite a bit more, actually. And we have this door here. There's nothing particularly special about this door. Just kind of generic stuff going on. They kind of have the tendency to do this. Like, remember I showed you that the Google image search thing that they made a tablet, or whatever you want to call it, out of in the parish? They kind of tend to do this with doors and emblems and things of that nature. They're pretty lazy about it. But this is that room. I think that's pretty much it as far as things concerning that particular room. But that is sort of the entrance area. People have obviously been tossing their dead down here for quite some time. It seems to be ritualistic. You'll notice the bugs in this room all over the place. Same kind of bugs that we saw whenever we woke up in our cells for our cell in the first time. The bugs seem to follow trails of power, or trails maybe of meat, but they do tend to sort of circulate around areas of interest, I've noticed. This is not really a gameplay thing, I've just kind of noticed it whenever I was walking around earlier. But perhaps more importantly, I'm not done talking about the bugs apparently. Come on, look at the wall. There you go. There you go, sweetie. But I want you to pay attention to this wall. You notice that this is, of course, just a bunch of skeletons and bones and skulls, primarily, situated here. But there is something interesting to note about it, is at the very bottom, this is layered. Like, you can see the layers of time. This, apparently, they've been piling corpses or whatever on top of one another for quite some time. And it has just, over time, become sort of a sedimentary layer of all these decayed bones. But at the very bottom, you'll notice that they are neatly stacked in a row. Very, very... a lot of attention has been paid to how carefully they were placed. Whereas something seemed to has happened right above that. Like, there's a little layer of that discoloration where something happened. And then after that, they tried to get back to work. They're kind of more unevenly placed. And then after that, it just goes all to shit. And the skulls just start showing up all over the place. Complete, just complete disorder. And then after that, there's like one last layer where they're just sort of barely in a row once again. If you can make that out, the very top row. And then it kind of goes back to shit once again. Take a closer look at this very top row. This is the middle area. And this part right at the very top seems to be the last effort to try to create some sort of stability in whatever system that they had implemented down here. So people have been throwing their dead down inside of the catacombs, and something has been taking them and carrying them and carefully placing them. There's nothing in these urns, by the way. Carefully placing them until something happened, and it's not really clear what that is exactly. And of course, we push down this thing, and it's going to open up that door that we saw earlier. And this has to have skulls on it as well, because, hey, we're in the catacombs. Everything has to have skulls. Your skulls have to have skulls upon them. When you look inside the skulls, there has to be more tinier skulls, rat skulls, whatever you can find. But something happened here, and the efforts to actually organize the dead and show them respect seems to have kind of fallen upon hard times. And here we see more of the Mask of the Father statues. And that's enough out of them. Let's proceed. Now we'll see over here. Yeah, there's a necromancer down there, but you can see the daylight up above. This pretty waterfall and whatnot. So this is sort of partially exposed to the outside world. But more importantly, we have our necromancer over here, also known as undead mages, which seems to imply that they are indeed humans. They're not like children of Nido or anything like that, which I'll talk about later. So they do seem to be humans that were in service to Nido, or at least maybe in service to Pinwheel, who we will talk about a bit later. But they do have the one job of creating these annoying little skeletons that are bound to them, and the skeletons will just reassemble forever unless you knock them into a pit like I did earlier, until you kill him, and at which point they will stop reassembling. Now, as I said before, the divine weapon path will actually stop them from assembling as well. It's good to have divine weapons, and I actually do have one with me, but I chose not to use it because I was being hard-headed, and as I said, just not in a particularly great mood yesterday. So long, asshole. Notice he does not have a beard or anything like that, which is an odd thing to say, I guess, but that'll come up more in a bit. It takes me a while to finish off these stupid skeletons. I was trying to be careful. I think one time I actually intentionally showed off the fact that you can be parried by these guys. This one. I tried to attack him just to show this off, because I thought, hey, maybe that will never happen again, so I might as well show it off once. Yeah, it happened several times. The thing about these skeletons is that they are very, very fast. And, of course, they are very numerous, as you can also see. But once they raise that scimitar that they have, and I think the shield that they're using is actually a warrior's round shield, specifically, even though they drop a completely different kind. And they are very, very fast whenever they go into that scimitar state where they're raising the sword. Anything that you hit them with, other than like a jumping attack or something, will go into that repostable animation. Be nice if you could do that, but unfortunately you can't. I think I end up surviving this. I was kind of dicking around, which is probably the earliest example of how much I was fucking up in this particular session. Come here, you nice ice water. What's the point of drinking water unless it's ice water, you know? But I do have a divine weapon in the form of the Astora's Straight Sword. And I think I just go ahead and get rid of all that, yeah. The Astora's Straight Sword. The Store Straightforward sword does have the Holy modifier, so it can cause these things to disassemble. But it's a pretty weak sword, so this is one of those things. You'll notice that there's bugs everywhere. More importantly, we see all the little catacombs thing. This guy, we see these guys around quite a bit. He apparently has two pelvises, because he has one that ends there, and then he has another that kind of begins at his pants. Or maybe he had his pants pulled down halfway whenever he died. So maybe he was masturbating whenever he died, or maybe he was snoo-snooed to death. We really don't know. But let's leave Snoo Man to his own devices. You'll notice the little candles, somehow they are burning, still. And we'll notice I was trying to point out the bugs. The bugs are swarming around here. This little area. Now what's up here, we will see much later on, even though I end up not going through the path because I didn't want to backtrack that much. But bugs do tend to congregate around areas of power or areas of interest, sort of. And more importantly, I think they tend to congregate around areas where there's probably still some flesh to be found. You notice this tiny detail, all these candles are the same, except they're lit in different patterns. Like that one had the center one lit, this one had these little two ones lit. Which probably tells you that the person making the map had to hand place these little bitty candles, or probably something like that. Which, either way, however they handled it, it tells you how much attention to detail some of the areas of the game have, while some other areas of the game have, like, no... Like, whenever we get to Izalith, all that kind of just falls apart and becomes a big mess. But anyways, let's go in here, take care of our friend. We don't want to wake you up just yet. Let's get this other guy out first. That's usually how I handle things. I am using the shield I got from Oscar, by the way, which is a really good shield, the Crush Shield. I think I might have been thinking about parrying this guy, but that's a very bad idea. Because parrying these skeletons does not work particularly well, because they are so fucking fast. Their attacks have like 5 frames of animation in some cases. I don't know the exact number, but I'm probably not even exaggerating. But here we have Lucy. For those of you that have been asking, yes, this is the weapon that's in my title card art. And you might think that means, well, this is the weapon that he's going to be using through his whole playthrough. But that's not the case. I probably won't actually be using this weapon at all. And I'll go over here and show off its moveset. The reason why that it's in my title card art is just because I really like Warhammers. It's my favorite kind of medieval weapon. Any kind of Warhammer, for the most part. I'm not a big fan of swords, and it's just overplayed with me. But I really like Warhammers. Now, you'll notice something about this weapon. As I demonstrate, it's R1, which is a big overhead thing where you're driving this beak down into your opponent. And this is R2, where you're spinning around like a big helicopter. Makes no sense at all. Whew, whew! Makes no sense at all. And its two-handed version is kind of basically the same thing. And I think you might get 2 spins out of this. Yeah, and again, that makes no sense at all. Completely idiotic. But the reason why I like Warhammers is just because they're so visceral and brutal of a weapon. And you would think, well, they don't even really draw blood. How can they be that visceral? They are very fucking visceral. Because the whole idea with them is that, at the time, people had started using plate mail and things like that. So it was basically impossible to get through someone's plate mail with a normal sword. So people came up with the idea, well, maybe instead of trying to create precision instruments that are able to get through little tiny segments of the plates, we just come up with something that hits them so hard that it causes the armor that they're wearing to vibrate and send shocks through their whole body, which could actually break bones and shatter all the blood vessels in their, body and like break apart muscle and shit like that. Here I'm trying to show off the fact that this is basically a spear. The little forward little part here is a spear, and it has the hammer component on top and the beak on the bottom. The spear obviously was the main thing that you used for attack historically. Spears and pikes and things like that, as I've said before, were the primary weapon of choice back in those days. It was not a sword. Swords were usually to sidearms. But you'll notice that this weapon is using the beak as the primary mode of attack for this weapon, which is not how you use it whatsoever. Usually you would use the, of course, spear, as I said. The secondary component would probably be the hammer, which you'll notice that wedge in the top of it. that was to catch, like, if an opponent's weapon or a handle or something like that, you would be able to catch it with that wedge and twist it and disarm them in that way. And also hammers, you'll notice usually in their designs, they do have a little bit of split in the middle, or they're, if you just look at pictures, you'll notice something odd about them. They're not flat, basically. And that is so that it transfers more kinetic force into the person that you're hitting. Because if it was perfectly flat, you would actually be losing a lot of it, and it would deflect off of their armor. The bottom part, the beak, is actually the least used part of the design. Because if you drill that into someone's armor, guess what? You're not getting that weapon back. It's in there probably for good. Very dangerous to use that. Usually they would actually use it to pull people off of horses, because people on horseback, they're dicks. They're fucking dicks. So that's basically how you use that weapon, historically. And in terms of the video game, it's just a piercing halberd. I think they really didn't give a shit how it actually works historically. And halberd with a large big light protrusion inflicts thrust damage. It's a thrust damage weapon. You're supposed to equip the Leo ring with it. Some people rush to get this weapon early on because they make a playthrough specifically for the Lucy. And they equip the Leo ring, and you can get some pretty big counter hits out of the Lucerne that way. But as I said, I probably won't be using it this playthrough. But the gist of it is that it's probably the closest thing that I'm going to get to a Warhammer in this game, which is why I put it in the title card art. There is something like a war pick, but it's really not the same thing. Plus, it sucks ass. But here's the Dragon King Great Axe. Is what I got off the Gaping Dragon. This axe, one of the rare dragon weapons, is formed by the tail of the Gaping Dragon, a distant, deformed descendant of the Everlasting Dragons. I just wanted to show that off just to say that it actually was not an Everlasting Dragon, it's just a descendant of one of those Everlasting Dragons. But you're supposed to be able to use its R2 to create a special effect, but I don't have the stats for it, so I ended up just swinging it around like a big turd. By the way, you may have noticed, but I like to change weapons and, outfits a lot. Like a lot. I'm not the kind of person that will start a whole playthrough just to test a single build or a single weapon. I change shit all the time. This is the Murakumo we got I got off screen, off of one of the giants, giant skeletons. Giant curved sword forged using special methods in the Eastern Land. This unparalleled weapon cuts like a katana, which I guess means that it doesn't cut well at all. But it is heavier than a Nada machete, which is even in this game, so why they even mention it, I don't know. Requires extreme strength, dexterity, and stamina to wield. Japan really loves giving themselves hand jobs when it comes to katanas and samurai and things like that. Even though, in truth, historically, they were pretty fucking shitty. Most of their historical weapons and so forth were made with inferior materials and had pretty poor design, and most of their military tactics were also inferior to most European tactics. And of course it was a different area though. They couldn't just run around making armor left and right because they had shitty pig iron, and the terrain was different. And there's all sorts of historical factors that I'm not going to go into. The point being, even looking at it that way, Japan really loves giving themselves hand jobs whenever they can. As you can see in Dark Souls 2, where the katanas are extremely overpowered due to their counter damage rating. Which they don't seem to give a shit about. They apparently don't see anything wrong with it, so they just keep doing it. Ice water. Oh, you are rescuing my throat right now. Which is not feeling particularly great. More generic bullshit. The Catacombs is just like this. It's a lot of just generic shit all around the place. This, here's a little indention where some draugrs are going to wake up to go attack Skyrim. And here's some more of them. And here's some more statues with father masks on them. And that's pretty much it. That's what the Catacombs is. Once you've seen the first little area, you have pretty much seen the entire area. And that said, I'm probably going to end up lingering in each area regardless. Anyways. Have I gone through all the major little points? I think I might have. Here we see the next necromancer that we need to take care of. But unfortunately, no time for that. We have to rush ahead and trigger the bridge so that we can actually get to him. The smart thing to do is just to kill him with arrows, which I demonstrate later. Because I do end up dying here because all the time that I spent making commentary, just now, it obviously went on for quite some time. And whenever I first recorded it, a lot of that was just not even information. It was just me just pissing around. And I kind of realized it and decided, you know what, I'm in a bad mood now. So as a result, I, at this point, was just kind of fucking around. So this is kind of where the the original commentary starts to fall apart. But I tried to get over here to take care of this necromancer, and I think I actually do almost kill him. It's kind of hard to get around all these skeletons. I think he actually survives with like a very small sliver of health. This, one of the skeletons gets in a lucky parry, which is kind of what ended up getting me. And plus, the fact that it's in such tight quarters, and the way that targeting works in this game means that it's not a good idea to accidentally ended my iframes right there. Yeah, that's what got me. But it's not a good idea to fight in little tight quarters like this, because the controls really aren't made for it in the first place. Notice the skull lantern that he has right there, if you could see it. You might have to rewind for it. But, that's what we want from the next area, which we won't be going into. I'll tell you that right now. But I wanted to go ahead and get, of course, the boss item for this area before I do anything else in the other areas of the game. I've actually been avoiding the catacombs, and I've actually been trying to do all my favorite areas of the game first. And the things that I haven't done have been because I've been trying to put it off. Because they're usually irritating in different ways. They may not be difficult. The Catacombs really is not that difficult. With a good 100% resistance, physical resistance shield, you can handle the Catacombs pretty easily. By the way, there's a shortcut over to my left that we might be able to use. I'll show it later, whenever I have a better camera angle on it. Easiest thing to do, probably just run through this area. But the Catacombs really is not that difficult. The skeletons are just really irritating, that's all. And again, most of that is just because of the fact that they it's not really even because they reassemble. It's mainly just because of the fact that they are so damn fast. Like you can see, just like things like that, their ability to just roll and instantly attack you in just a few frames of animation. By the way, you'll notice he dropped a red and white round shield. They don't actually equip them. Like I said, they equip the Warrior's round shield, I'm pretty sure. That one might actually have a... No, it's still Warrior's round shield. But I think I might show off the description of that later. So I'll just wait on that. An alternative to using like the Astora Straight Sword that we got from the Valley of Drakes, which will cause them to stop reassembling. Another option would be, say, go to Dark Root, which we haven't done yet, so if you're confused, don't worry. And get the Divine Ember from that location. And that will allow you to give that to Andre, and he'll start... that will enable you to upgrade any weapon in your inventory that can be upgraded in this manner to the Divine Path. So you can... And usually people will use something like a Reinforced Club. Reinforced Club is probably the best strength weapon in the game for just it being a small one-handed weapon. Like, I'll go into more that sort of stuff later, but as far as just little one-handed things like that, Reinforced Club is probably the best option because it has the best scaling. And most of the strength weapons are either extremely big, dumb things, or they are tiny little things that have the same exact moveset, so there's not much to differentiate them. Okay, here I decide, you know what, I'm just going to show it off. Because normally I don't do this. I'm not really the type to sit back and snipe at things most of the time. So, but in this case I figured, why not? Because I was in a pissy mood and I kind of felt like, I kind of get in those moods sometimes. I will go ahead and tell you, this is on my little notepad, just to keep track of what exactly it is that I had been saying at the time. Here, I'm pretty sure that I was just muttering to myself and cursing about how necromancers are fucking irritating because they shoot these goddamn flames so fucking far. But, you know, this is the better commentary, so we'll not discuss that. We won't discuss that. But I did want to mention that there is a lot of confusing and conflicting information concerning the 4 Lord Souls down here. Just for one, the Divine Weapon Path. What is divinity in this game? Usually that's associated with the gods. Like if you go down the Divine Path, that's linked with the Soul of Light. It's linked with Anor Londo, the gods. It's odd that would be the thing that would cause these skeletons to stop reassembling. You would think that it would relate to, say, the Witches of Islith. Like, you would think that fire, or, like a chaos upgrade path, would cause the skeletons to stop reassembling, since that's usually being portrayed as being the opposite to Needle's soul. But that's not the case. It just uses Gwen's soul for some bizarre reason. And another weird thing about that is that later on, and it may not see it in this episode, it depends on how much time I end up having, but we'll find a weaponsmith down here that actually upgrades things down the fire and chaos paths, which, again, doesn't really make any sense. And here I'm showing off the mother and child statues. And the child apparently is not too happy, since it is ejecting spikes out of its mouth and eyes, as children are often wont to do. As I'm told. I don't have children, but I'm pretty sure that they all do this. I recall doing it whenever I was little. But this is sort of the point where they start doing that. There was one back in the the little room that I was in before, and that's where they first start. And they all do that. They all eject spikes from their faces. Let's see. There's something else I was going to mention in regards to. I was just going to say that the confusion regarding the upgrade system and the way that the Lord Souls are sort of aligned against one another isn't something they really ever worked out completely. Another example of this would be, say, since we're talking about the Divine Weapon Path anyways, if you upgrade a shield with the Divine Path, nothing happens. It has the same exact stats as a normal shield. And here I decide, I'm not going to go down this path just yet, I wanted to show off this first. But if you upgrade a shield to Divine, nothing happens. Because, obviously, they never finish the upgrade system. So a lot of the things like, and one of the little Titanite, little slugs, little fuckers, just immediately vanishes. Just of his own accord. Didn't even give me a chance to attack him. Guess I'll have to go back and get him next time. At least they do reappear. Just from watching Demon Souls playthroughs, usually it seems like they're kind of easier to catch in Demon Souls in some respects. Dark Souls, a little bit more annoying. And you'll notice that I was trying to show this off, that these things hit you 2 times, not just 1. And sometimes they just hit through your shield just because they feel like it. But I go back here just to show this off. But obviously, there's a lot of pots and urns and stuff and dead bodies that apparently have been thrown down here at some point. And in respect to the catacombs in general, it seems that the catacombs have a lot of isolated rooms that have at some point been sealed off. And they were kind of patched up and then forgotten. And like you see these things again. I don't know if these were actually like part of a collapsed wall. Like if we were to collapse all the walls around here, they would all look like this. Or if the skeletons and bones and whatnot were shoved into these holes while they were still open. I have no idea. But that's the gist of it, is that this is an area that is just absolutely packed to the brim with dead bodies. Like, even though we don't see all of it, if you were to start knocking down rock walls in every which way, you would start finding more and more dead bodies just falling out in every single direction. Now we go up here and we find ourselves more generic catacomb shit. So interesting. This is one of the reasons why I kind of went crazy. But this is the reason why I didn't pick up this item before. It's just so I could pick it up here. Soul of a proud knight. He must have been mighty proud to have died right here. Don't ask me why he died right here. It's probably another instance of them just saying, you know what would be good to put here? Some souls. So they just put a corpse there and then forgot about it. The problem with this game often is that it asks you to really overanalyze certain details, whereas other details, they kind of just shit themselves right there. And then expect you to not make to question it at all. But this is the shortcut I was talking about. You might be able to jump over here. I think they might have fixed that, actually. And if you fall down there, then it's probably the fastest way to the final boss of this area. You can fall down that area and then fall down another one of the little patches of dirt like I showed earlier. And I'll show that much later, I think. And that will enable you to circumvent pretty much everything. I tried to demonstrate here that you can get hit by this thing, and I end up eating it anyways. Go away, skeleton. You naughty old skeleton. These things are everywhere. This area is obviously designed so that whenever you go past an area that you think is just an empty room, another one of these things will pop out. And here I wasn't absolutely sure if this one was hinged to the necromancer that I already killed, or it's hinged, or it's attached, or whatever. It's bound, I guess the proper word. If it's bound to the one that's further down. And I realize here, once I don't get any souls from it, that means that yes, it is indeed further down. And this is another problem with trying to commentate this area. And I do get killed from doing this, because I immediately got irritated by the fact that I would have to go kill that other necromancer. The only time that you will die in Dark Souls is whenever you allow it to happen. Now, I skipped ahead here just to save a little bit of time, because I think I might be able to work a little bit more into the end of this episode. I'm not sure if I can get down the pinwheel or not. If I do, I haven't recorded that yet, so I guess future Eli will end up being the one that takes care of that. But I end up going down here. This is where the next necromancer is. And there's going to be another one that is associated with this little bitty, tiny, isolated pocket area, which makes this whole little spiral sort of zone all the way to the bottom extremely irritating. And you can see that my gameplay is definitely suffering as a result. Again, not because this area is difficult. It's really not that difficult of an area if you're just patient. But I was not in a patient mood at all. But anyways, I guess I'll wait here. This is the area that's going to... What does this one do? This one turns over the bridge, I think. That's below this one? I can't remember. It's one of those... You notice I can't pick this thing up. And it ends up being out here, magically. Which makes no sense at all. Dark Souls, everyone! Yay, Dark Souls! Thank you for the experience of ruining my life. Dark Souls. And I think this is where I actually do show it off for the first time. Red and white round shield. Round wooden shield crafted in Lordran featuring an impressive red and white design. The giant trees of Lordran are distant offspring of the great stone arch trees. The shield inherits their properties and the wood greatly reduces magic damage. So by extension of the previous episode where I was actually talking about the fact that it looks like the arch trees are growing up and producing these giant trees that are in Lordran, that is correct. They are in fact extensions of the stone arch trees, and that's important to note, that the arch trees that are below this world that we live in are made of stone, just like everything else. The dragons were also made of stone. Their skin, at least, was made of stone. And I think I pop up here and I start trying to figure out what exactly I should do, because there's plenty of things to show off. I ended up deciding to just go up here. By this point, my commentary had been absolutely destroyed, and I was just mumbling everything. And I think just like a couple minutes after this, I decided, you know, I'm just going to keep my fucking mouth shut. But if you come down here very early in the game, like right away, then Patches will be down here. And as soon as the bridge will actually be right side up. And the moment that you try to go across, he will turn that over and try to get you killed. A little bit of optional dialogue I sort of regret not getting, because it is kind of funny. But again, there were other things to do. And obviously those first few episodes were kind of a bit of a mess anyways in terms of progression. And obviously this is how I like to play the game. I really don't like having things dictated to me, which boss I should beat first and so on. I think it took me, what was it, 3 or 4 episodes to actually get to the killing the first boss, and even then, I killed 2 of them in 1 episode. And that was during the podcast episode. Anyways, there is something I want to talk about, and it is a comment that was left in, I think, it was either 2 videos ago or 1 video ago. I don't remember who said it. But someone asked, is hollowing limited to humans? And what about dogs and rats, by extension, I think was something he also mentioned. You can, by the way, I'm going to show off this shortcut here. This skeleton decides to follow me down into oblivion. So long, skeleton. But you could also have just walked down here normally, but I wanted to show that off. And you'll go down here and we pick up the stupid Great Scythe. I'll have to say my question about hollowing for a second. Okay, this is the Great Scythe. This is probably the best dexterity weapon in the game. In terms of a big sort of... Actually, even one-handed, it's probably still really good. Kind of the same thing. And I'll go ahead and mention, yes, scythes were used historically in war. But to understand that, you have to realize that the people that used scythes in war were farmers, people that used scythes to cut grain. And what exactly did they have lying around whenever someone came to the door and said, "We got a sword, we're gonna stick you and rape your dog," or whatever exactly they did back then? The only thing they had were these. So what they would do, they would take their scythes, they would detach the blade, and reattach it facing the enemy. So the way this is configured right now is asinine to the nth degree. There's no possible way you could ever really use this in combat. Think about it, you would have to reach around your opponent and pull back towards yourself just to be able to hit them. Really asinine. Anyways, the reason why it's considered good is because of this R2. You notice right there, this R2 that swings all the way around. You can hit tons of enemies with that arc. It is ridiculous. And of course, in real life, there is no possible way that you would probably injure anyone doing that. Rolling R1, I think, is, yeah, just an overhead. And I think rolling R2 is the same thing. Backstep goes into the same R2 animation. But that's probably the reason why it's considered the best dex weapon of the game. It has amazing scaling, pretty damn good damage, and it has that amazing moveset. And more importantly, it can dead angle. Now, I've mentioned dead angling in the past, I think whenever I beat the Bell Gargoyles. The way that collision with shields work in this game is pretty wonky, which is why sometimes if something hits you on a different Z-axis, then it will go past your shield and hit you anyways, even though it probably shouldn't. And dead angling, let's say that this pot is an enemy that's raising its shield towards us, and I'm standing right here. I can hit them if I swing in this direction. If I'm looking away from them, but my weapon still manages to collide with their player model, it will actually circumvent the shield entirely. Along with backstabbing and things like that, dead angling is one of those things people use primarily in PvP to be a nuisance. One of the many ways that people end up ruining the game for themselves. Hello, Explodey Head. Again, I have no idea what these things are. They seem to have something inscribed on their foreheads, which seems to suggest to me that they're probably... They used to be humans, and their heads were severed and put to use using some sort of dark ritual that made them sort of sentries of some kind, if I had to guess. And we've already been here, actually, but this is the area in between this area and the last. But actually, no, we haven't been here, because backtracking into this area is a very bad idea, as I remembered instantly, because this area has not been cleared out. And is a necromancer still attached to this area, so that means that we're going to have to kill him before we can really do any exploration of this zone, this little bitty isolated pocket of area. Anyways, the hollowing question. Is hollowing limited to humans? What about the dogs and rats? Hollowing is not limited to humans, and some of you might be getting into an uproar about that right now. But there is a distinction between going hollow and being afflicted with the undead curse. Now, some of you might not understand that, but I will point out that gods and humans and the witches of Izalith and even Nito all used to be pygmies. And whenever they get the soul, the Lord Soul, or even fragments of the Lord Soul, like humanity, see the skeletons reassembled back there. So we're going to take care of that necromancer. Whenever we get a soul, then we become humans, or we become gods, or we become whatever the aspect of that soul happens to be. And I'm going to have to rush and go through this area. Treasure, I want to point that out. I'll talk more about that in a bit. So, hollowing is just whenever we lose that soul. And being afflicted with the undead curse is something entirely different. Although, of course, you do slowly go hollow whenever you do that. Like, say, Gwyn is hollow at the end of this game because his soul has burned. It is burnt out. Like, he's lost most of that soul. Not because he has the undead curse, but just because he's consumed all of it as fuel. And that was the last necromancer. Thank God for that. Get to make these skeletons finally eat shit. I accidentally... Example of it happening accidentally. He managed to get that little parry arm up just in time. If you funnel these guys up, it helps in some ways, but at the same time, they can attack through one another, so it can actually get you killed in some circumstances. Like even little hollows and so forth. Anyways, Gwyn did hollow because he burned off all of his soul as fuel. The undead have a similar problem, except theirs is more natural. So that is the distinction. Now, the Skull Lantern that I was trying to point out earlier, you can equip this in your left hand or your right hand. If you equip it in your right hand, you get nothing but attacks. And I think they're both the same as far as R2 and R1 goes. And if you equip it in your offhand, then I think it's just the L1 that creates the light effect. Otherwise, you just do a normal attack, like so. And this is the... yeah, okay, there it goes. This is the L1. This is what's going to enable us to, much later in the game, explore the Tomb of the Giants. If I don't have a better light source by then. Hint, hint, possibly. Maybe. I have no idea, actually. But it has a nice little jack-o'-lantern effect, isn't it cute? Such a little cutie. But let's take a look at the description here. Skull Lantern of the Catacombs Necromancer. Droops from his long beard locks. Remember what I asked earlier? This lantern lights the Tomb of the Giants, Nito's light-devouring domain of death, also serves as a fire damage strike weapon. You'll notice, droops from his long beard locks. What the fuck are they talking about? It seems to be talking about the Necromancer that uses it, but you'll notice that the physical design does not have a beard. None of the Necromancers, the undead Medjis, have a beard. My assumption, and I talked with a German spy about this, and he couldn't figure it out either. But we sort of just reached the conclusion that probably at some point in development, early on, the design of the things, they had beards, and the Skull Lantern was just drooped down below that. And rather than using the Skull Lantern as a weapon, they probably had some sort of other weapon, and it just hung on them like that. And they probably at some point just dropped that idea entirely, if I had to guess. That's my idea. Although later we will, of course, meet Vamos, the blacksmith of this area, and he will have a design that's sort of similar to that idea that raises some suspicions for me. Now, in this room, there's nothing of particular interest in here, other than these fucking statues, which will probably get me. Once again, I'll try to roll perfectly through them, but... actually, no, I think I just do that. Okay, yeah. But in here we will find... the miracle Tranquil Walk of Peace. This is an unusual miracle as far as its location goes. And I think by the way, I spent a lot of time grinding and buying up pyromancies and miracles just so that I could show them off at some point. Not going to do it just yet, though. It took me a fuckload of time. Outlawed Miracle, 4 into the Way of White. Slows all walking within effect area. This miracle is normally used to flee as it slows walking, but does not affect attacks. But nevertheless defines peace perfectly. Oh, is that what peace is? Of course it is. A couple things to notice here. Outland Miracle. 4 into the Way of White. 2 most important things. As I've said in the past, magic in general in this world is stuff that's hand-me-down. Most of the people don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense to them. They're just hand-me-down things that are handed off from one generation to the other. Outland Miracle means that it was developed outside of what would be considered to be normal human culture. Places like Thurland and Astora and things like that. Those are all hand-me-down areas. They don't really develop new technologies as far as magic goes. So an Outland Miracle is usually means that it is foreign to the Way of White. That's usually what that means. Way of the White is closely associated with the gods, with the Church of Thurland, with people like Allfather Lloyd. Oh god, Allfather Lloyd. That is going to be a mess of an episode. But basically, this is the gist of it. The Tranquil Walk of Peace was developed in Ulasil, which we will get to much later in the game. Just wanted to point that out, because it is very unusual that it would be here. This little thing, remember at the very beginning whenever all those bugs were crawling around on the ceiling, and I pointed out that little hole? If you fell down that, that's where you would end up. But since I sat at a bonfire recently, all those guys would be respawned, I think. So that's the reason why I decided not to go down there. But that is where that leads out, for anyone that was wondering. Okay, but that's it for this area, aside from the big old meaty old skeleton that I passed, who may have been a gigantic woman that created all these little snoo skeletons. Who knows? I know that's my personal lore, because... oh god, yes, that's my personal lore. But where is it? Where is it? Oh, there he is. And I tried to bait him in here just to show that he or she, or whatever, I don't know, can't go through here if you bait them hard enough. And that can be a big danger if you're trying to kill that necromancer. So easier to just run through the area and get that necromancer as soon as possible rather than dicking around with this giant skeleton beforehand. I think the ones down here actually have quite a bit more health than the ones up top. Otherwise, they are exactly the same. And again, I'll point out that it's using the Murakumo. Whether these are humans that are from an eastern land, which we will meet humans that are from the east later on, but whether they actually are skeletons from the east, I have no idea. We'll have to make our own interpretations on that one. But this is by far the most important little area in the Catacombs. This right here, as far as lore goes. You'll notice, again, this is sort of exposed to the outside world. But we have a corpse down here in this little coffin who has an item for us. But more importantly, before we even handle this, look above. Come on, past Eli. Look up, you stupid prick. We will notice, again, mother and child statue. The thing that we keep seeing everywhere in Anor Londo. We keep seeing it everywhere, and here it is again. It's a slightly different statue, but it's the same thing. And it guards the Dark Moon Seance Ring. Now, what the fuck is this, past Eli? If you can open up your thing. I was trying to point out that corpse. This is a male corpse, although I don't think there are female corpses in this game. Anytime they want an item hinged to something, they put it on that generic corpse. Dark Moon Seance Ring. This ring is granted to adherents of Gwyndolin, Dark Moon deity and the lastborn of Gwyn, Lord of Sunlight. Grants additional mana. The Dark Moon Gwyndolin, the Dark Sun Gwyndolin, is the only remaining deity in Anor Londo. His followers are few, but their tasks are of vital importance. This is very important information. We haven't even gotten to Anor Londo yet, and it's already telling us that Gwyndolin is the only god that is in Anor Londo. More importantly than this, why is this even here? We'll go more into who Gwyndolin is whenever we actually get to Anor Londo. But why is this here, this Dark Moon Seance Ring? Ask yourself this. We have already found the Ulusilian miracle up top. So this seems to be a little isolated area where things of great importance are stored. And the fact that this mother and child statue is here, I don't know, it seems to me, I thought about this quite some time. The only sort of story that I could really formulate is maybe this might be the mother of Gwyndolin, who possibly died in childbirth, and they carried the corpse down here to be in service to Nito. To be given to Nito to fulfill his own tasks, or to be just put there for the sake of reverence. But it is unusual that, if that was true, that it wouldn't be buried up inside of Anor Londo. And the fact that it's a god, and the gods don't really die in the same capacity that humans do, makes it especially unusual. Because it means that it would have to be a traumatic death of some kind. And of course, Gwyndolin himself is considered to be sort of an aberration. He has a natural leaning towards the moon rather than the sun, which is why he was raised as being a woman rather than a man. So this could also, the mother and son thing could also have some significance with that. It's extremely confusing. But either way, you can create your own stories about what happened. The gist of it, I was trying to point out, is that people are carried here whenever they are dead to be offered to Nito, possibly because they are trying to give them some sort of purpose. Like we saw graveyards up, we saw tombstones up in the graves up above the catacombs. So people obviously at some point were buried normally. But at the same time, in the same area, they were carried down below the graveyards and given to Nito. So the idea behind that, I'm guessing, is that whenever people couldn't bear the thought that their loved ones are gone forever, they would give the corpses to Nito, and Nito would repurpose them as his own children. Dark Souls 2 kind of fucks this up by introducing the fun Nito, and I kind of consider Dark Souls 2 to be fanfiction, so I don't really consider things from that game to be canon exactly. But in this game, just looking at this game isolated, Nito doesn't have his own children like the other souls do, because all the other children, whenever they die, become his, because he is the Lord of the Dead. He's the first of the dead. His children are the dead. So that's the sort of the backstory that I've kind of created for myself, is that whenever people die, then their loved ones will take the corpses and give them to Nito, which is why there's a big pile of them at the very start of this area. And why exactly there would be a god here with a developer message. This is especially unusual. This is the only developer message that I can think of in the entire game. Dumbass arrow. In the entire game that is outside of the asylum. Excluding the miracle that gives you more messages. Whenever you use it, it shows developer messages that they have placed. Although those have to be there or else the miracle wouldn't do anything, right? But that little message is unusual in that it is the only one in the entire game that is outside of the asylum. You notice it has Oscar's picture on it whenever I go look at it. But Oscar's not the one that wrote it. At least I don't think. That's just because whenever a message has 0 votes or 1 vote or whatever, it shows a picture of him. And the more ratings that it has, the picture will change. And I think the top ranked one is actually Frampt. It changes to a picture of Frampt. So that the picture doesn't really mean much of anything. But just treasure. It's odd that someone would put this message down here and say treasure, but at the same time not have the wall open in the first place. The easiest explanation for this is just that the developers put it here to make sure that someone would know whenever they pass by, oh, this wall can be broken. Because maybe they considered the items inside to be of such great importance that, unlike anything else in the entire game, they decided we can't let players go by this one area without at least hinting that there's something very special inside. And that's pretty much that's the only thing I can really think of. Because any other actual lore reasoning I can give doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So I'm just going to kind of I'm going to have a lore mulligan on this one and just say, you know what, it's just the fucking developers. Don't worry about it. Regardless, the fact that the statue is so prominent does link it with Gwendolyn, or at least the Darkmoon Covenant. The fact that wearing the ring dispels his illusions in Anor Londo and leads you to him may mean that the mother and child statue may be present in areas where there are lies or deception, or maybe great sacrifices. They're in the elevators leading to both entrances in New Londo, and there is more mother and child imagery in the parish right above a Firekeeper's soul. So be on the lookout for those statues, or maybe they just had the model, liked the look of it, and threw it in front of anything that they thought looked even mildly important. Again, it's FromSoft, so sometimes it's of vital importance, and sometimes it's just lazy. Now, this is the part of the episode where I run out of things to talk about. Because there is plenty more to talk about as far as the Catacombs go. But, we haven't gotten to it yet. We're just down this long stretch of hallway. We're going to encounter, our second experience with a Titanite demon. Although I didn't fight the first one. This one has way more health, as you can see here. And I'm going to give you the pleasurable experience of having the same experience that I had, which is trying to fight this fucking thing and trying to get its health all the way down. I'll go ahead and tell you I'm going to make a cut here because I don't die, but I end up getting down to like 1 Estus flask and deciding, you know what, I'm going to have to go back. Just because, as you can probably see here, that was a mistake, but ever so often, his attacks will just go through your shield just because because this little baby decided, baby wants a hit, free damage for baby. These things are really wonky, especially this one because you're in such a tight corridor where you can't really move or do anything. And see, like, his tail, just the fact that his tail was there, nudging you briefly, and I get pulled back into his attack because he wanted free damage. Just, there's so many things about this thing that I absolutely detest. I hate fighting these things. By the way, the weapon that he is using, you can get it as a drop. I don't get it here, unfortunately. But it's called a Titanite catchpole. And it is, in fact, a real weapon. It was used by people on horseback to catch runaway slaves, which is kind of a weird thing, but they actually made a weapon for it. I guess it happened quite a lot. It's almost as though people don't like being enslaved. Why do these slaves not cooperate more? They're only slaves. It's not like they're lords or anything. Not important people like us. I don't have a high opinion of slavery, if you can't tell. But then again, what a surprise. Blake doesn't like slavery. Anyways, I get down here to low health and I decide, I'm fucking done with this guy. And I briefly tried this to get out the longbow. Said, maybe I'll do this. But he fires so quickly that it's just incredibly dangerous. So at this point, I'm just going to cut it and say, see, he even fires through the fucking walls. This guy is so... I fucking hate this guy. Anyways, I'll make a cut here, and then I'll come back in a second. And we're back. I got him down to 1 hit. It took quite a while. I didn't actually die to him, thankfully. But it did take quite a while, and I had to make a couple of different attempts. He almost one-shots me right there. Got him down to 1 hit, and he almost one-shot kills me. What a dick. I fucking hate these things. Sometimes I have no trouble with them at all, and I don't take a hit at all. Other times, like today, especially whenever you don't really have enough damage to deal with them, like this one has a lot of health, so he's kind of a problem to deal with in some circumstances, then they can become a problem. Now, is this a Titanite catch pole? No, I'll go ahead and tell you, it's just a Demon Titanite, unfortunately. So, these guys always drop Demon Titanite, I'm pretty sure. They have a small chance of dropping a Titanite catch pole, and one of them might drop it guaranteed in whenever we get to Sense Fortress. But Demon Titanite, special Titanite stolen from a faceless stone beast known as Titanite Demon. When the nameless blacksmith deity passed from several slabs, great beasts arose and the power of Titanite remains within them, and they still roam Lordaeron today. So there used to be a god associated with the blacksmiths. Now, whether or not this god still exists in some form or not, who can say? Maybe we'll meet him later. Or maybe that's just blind speculation. Who can really say? But either way, this asshole died, and as a result of him dying, for some reason, due to magic, we get these assholes. The very important thing, supposedly, that this guy was guarding were just 3 Eyes of Death, which we found on basilisks much earlier in the game off of regular drops. So we did all that for pretty much nothing. But the reason why that they are there is so that you can use this coffin. You can jump in this coffin, hide in there for a little bit of time, and take a slow ride all the way down to Nido. But we'll save that for next time. There is still plenty to talk about. We have a boss coming up, and I want to make sure that gets all the time it deserves. Hopefully by that time I will have learned my lesson about playing whenever I know that I shouldn't be playing. Which I probably won't, But we'll see. So, I will see you guys next time. Don't go hollow in the meantime. I will see you later.